Hi everyone. Before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
I was so excited that nobody could tell me what to do, and now I need somebody to tell me what to do, right? You got to figure it out.
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like. Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast. I have an incredible guest today who is a friend of mine and a client of mine. His name is James Beck, who is a bondservant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. Husband, father, and combat veteran of the United States Army turned vetrepreneur, living in the Pacific Northwest, madly in love with, as he described, his smoldering wife, Carmen. James is also the CEO and owner of Lifebook Military, which we're going to get into here today. Particularly the Lifebook side of things, which I think anybody listening to this can gain a ton of value from partaking in and leveraging Lifebook. But before we get there, James, welcome to the show, bro. I know we talk just about every day, but I'm so excited to have you here in this format.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. This is a pretty cool deal for me.
Absolutely, man. I think you're a perfect fit for this show and this audience for what we stand for, because you got a lot of really cool things going on with Lifebook. But before we get there, you've done a lot of very cool things in the past that everyone in this show should and will admire, and that's serving our country, right? And so first off, thank you for your services. Extremely admirable, for sure. And so can you just tell the audience a little bit about your service in the military and why did you get into it and what titles and duties did you hold that you're willing to share?
Yeah, I've got a long-standing tradition of service in my family. Both my grandfathers in World War II, my dad was in the Air Force, my uncle was in the Navy. I got a brother and a stepbrother that were in the Air Force. And so it just kind of was something that was in the cards. I grew up, my dad was a police officer my entire life. So we just have this kind of long-standing service or a tradition of service in our family. And so when it came time for me to become an adult and figure out what I wanted to do with my life, that was kind of always in the path. And so I signed up and got to work.
I love it. It's almost like you had no choice, whether they were forcing you to do it or not, right? Like it's all you saw, right? All you experienced growing up. So it was like every idol that you had, father figure, or male figure in your life was doing that, And I actually have a buddy, actually my college roommate. His dad was a lieutenant in the Navy, and they lived in Annapolis, right next to the naval base. And every single male in his family, it's like you grow up and you go into the Navy. And so he's in there, and his two twin brothers are in there now too as well. And it's like not even that they were forced to; they just were influenced, in the best way possible. And so, remind me, how long did you serve for?
Yeah, a better part of 2 decades. So I got out at 15 years, and a lot of people will go, "How come you didn't go the full 20?" And I figured I could do more with the next 5 years of my life if I got out and took that time for myself. And, the landscape of the military was changing and there was a lot of politics and stuff going on. This is right before COVID. So it was just, I got out at the right time. It was the right decision for me. And it's interesting because you talked about the influence of your family. My dad actually didn't want me to do any of that. I wanted to be a cop like him. And he just didn't, for the same reason, all the politics and all the stuff going on. He's like, you don't want to live this life, takes you away from your family, all these kind of things. But like you said, I didn't have another plan. There was no backup for me to do something different. That's what I had kind of planned on doing my entire life. And so I was like, well, this is what I'm going to do, Dad. And I did it, and it turned out good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was just doing some simple math in my head. So did you exited 2019, 2020?
No, It was 2016, so it was a
2016.
couple of years before COVID, but
Okay.
I would have been retiring if I'd stayed in those 5 years. I would have obviously been
Oh,
retiring in the middle of COVID and been in the military at that time in the middle of COVID. And I can't even imagine with all the vaccine issues we went through and all that.
yeah.
I'm so thankful, that that I got out when I did, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. You got at the right time. I mean, not the same thing, but I worked in healthcare during COVID. Like I literally went to Hawaii for vacation the first week of March 2020, and I came back and COVID broke out to the point where we almost got quarantined in Hawaii, which I kind of
Yeah.
wish we would have. And I came back and had to work in a hospital, running a hospital mid-COVID. So you got out at the right time. And that's
Yeah.
literally I left shortly after that. And so question though, what wasn't on my agenda here today, but it is something that you help people with, which is like acclimating to civilian life, and you've done
Yeah.
an amazing job of doing that. When you left in 2016, what were some keys to successfully acclimating to civilian life?
Well, I loved being a soldier. I loved being a soldier. And I didn't get out because I didn't want to be a soldier anymore. I got out because I wanted to stop trading my time for other people's money and take control of my time and control of my money.
Mm.
And I knew that I couldn't do that there because of all the politics and everything that was going on. You don't own your life when you're in the military. And so when I got out, one of the things that I realized very quickly was that I was going to hit this paradox. And I think most veterans will understand this, but the paradox is that when you're in the Army, even though it is a difficult life, don't get me wrong when I say this, all you really have to do is show up and do what you're told. There's always somebody to tell you what to do. Okay. You do have to exercise initiative in the absence of orders, but there's always somebody to tell you what to do. You got to be up at a certain time. You got to be here at a certain time. You got to do this a certain way. There's a standard. It's all written down, like all of that stuff, right? So when you get out, you have this moment where, the alarm goes off in the morning and you wake up and you start getting into your routine. You go, wait a minute. I don't have to be at formation this morning. I don't have to go to PT. I don't have to do anything. And if I don't do it, nobody is going to yell at me. I'm not going to get a phone call. Where the hell are you? None of that's going to happen. And you just kind of sit back down and you chill out and you like, nobody can tell me what to do anymore. And you're in this, state of bliss, right? Well, that lasts for a very short period of time when you're out in the world and you realize you don't know what to do with yourself. And so you start looking around, you go, shit, somebody tell me what to do with myself. Like I was so excited that nobody could tell me what to do. And now I need somebody to tell me what to do, right? You got to figure it out. And so that was a big thing that I was concerned about early on and fortunate to have figured out early on because a lot of people don't. And then they get lost in the backlash of that. They just have no direction and it's all chaos.
Something so simple but so substantial at the same time,
Yeah,
right? And it's almost probably it takes a lot for a strong-willed man or female who's been in the military, fought for our country, to admit like, hey, there's something wrong here, and I think it's just simply I don't have somebody telling me what to do. I have no direction, right? And so I know that's a big reason why you turned vetrepreneur. I love that
right.
term. And you're helping active and post-military vets in optimizing their civilian life by using this incredible tool and methodology called Lifebook. And so can you explain what Lifebook is to the audience and why it's such an amazing tool and kind of how it helps you be, right on brand here, holistically successful in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of your brand of this podcast, right? It's about having success across all areas of life, right?
Right.
Where people like you that have been very successful, have made lots of money, have a giant company and all this stuff working, realize that you can't just ignore everything else in your life just to make this work, right? Which is what a lot of people do. And so in Lifebook basically slices your life into 12 categories. So you have health and fitness, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, character. I'm trying to list them off in order here, but parenting, your love relationship, your social life, your career, your financial life, and your quality of life. And then it all culminates into your overall life vision, right? And so inside each of those categories, Lifebook asks you or helps guide you through answering these four questions, which is what do you believe about that category? What do you want from it? Why do you want it? And what are you going to do to get it? Okay. And the interesting thing is that, we were just talking about this holistic approach, right? So when you have all those things working at the highest level together, we call that a 12 category smart life. Nobody that you'll ever meet is ever going to tell you, nah, I don't want a 12 category smart life. I'll just take nine. I'll be rich, but I don't care if my marriage is in the toilet, or, I'll have a great career, but it's okay if it doesn't even cover the cost of my bills. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
nobody wants to do that. I'm okay with being an emotional basket case as long as I've got good health and fitness, right? Like, nobody says that. And yet we all live that way in one way, shape, or form. There are at least one or
Sure.
two categories that are just tanked, that we are just completely inept
One
at.
or two if we're lucky.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And maybe one or two that are working well if we're lucky,
Yeah.
right? So
Very true.
so the cool thing about that, though, especially for veterans, is that we go through a lot of, like, there's no shortage of programs being thrown at us. This is what's going to help you transition better. This is what's going to help put your brain back together after all the stuff you've been in war. This is what's going to, and we go through these programs, and they all tend to be very lackluster, right? People don't really understand what we've gone through if we're dealing with civilians, or if we're dealing with veterans counselors or whatnot. It like veteran groups, for example. I love being in veteran groups, but it tends to be a lot of reminiscing, where at the end of the deal, all you really have come out with is that everybody's just as messed up as you are. You know what I mean? So none of them really move the needle as much as we need to. And so we get pretty tired going through these programs. And then the next time a program comes at us, it's like, yeah, okay, I don't need another program. That's enough, right? The difference between that and Lifebook is, in Lifebook, the answers don't come at you, they come from you. So it's guidance versus advice, right?
So good. So
And
good.
so any of those other programs that you found that have had something of value, but you haven't been able to maybe get a hold of it, perhaps, you now have a place for it in your Lifebook, right? So Lifebook's like a Rolodex of self-development, if people watching are old enough to to know what a Rolodex is. Um, for all you kids watching out there, we used to call people on numbers that we stored in our heads, but that's a whole nother conversation. But so yeah, so that's what it does. It just kind of organizes everything, right? And then you get to decide what goes in it. It's not like Lifebook tells you this is how you're supposed to live or this is how you're supposed to think. You get to decide that. It's just a framework, right? So it's
Mm.
just the skeletal system that you get to pack on the muscle you want to pack on there that matters to you. And so that's why it's been super helpful for me.
It's an extremely effective tool. It's been around for a while. The owners, John and Missy, are like the definition of the real deal. And it's an incredible product for anybody. But I know you specifically use it for vets. And
Yeah.
so how does this specifically help them integrate into civilian life, whether it's vets, which we'll call them post-military, or active military who like come home at night, right?
Yeah.
And like I think that's something that was a huge, I don't want to say surprising, but eye-opener to me when you and I first started working together, and they're like, dude, like active vets really struggle with this civilian life as well. And I'm like, how? And you're like, because they have to go home at night. They go home
Right.
on the weekends. They take a week off and they've got no idea how to live. Right. So James helps vets, right? And active military kind of accustom or grow into civilian life by utilizing Lifebook. And so how do you see that being most effective when it comes to that?
So Lifebook in general is best used when you're in a transition. And
Mm.
so it can be any transition. You just had a baby, right? So how different is your life now than it was before?
Drastically.
Huge transition.
I'm not a little kid anymore.
You are now an adult. You are a father, right?
Yep.
So it's about taking the last stage of your life and then reviewing it. Well, how did that go? What did I do? What worked? What didn't work? And then planning for that next stage of your life, right? And again, that can be having a baby, getting a divorce, getting married, getting a new job, whatever the case may be. And a big part of that transition is getting out of the service and going into being a civilian, right? That's a big transition that we go through. But then when you go back to those active duty guys, we have this immense structure in our military lives. Now, don't get me wrong, because, and every vet that's listening out there, active duty guys listening out there, is going to know exactly what I mean. The people that we work with sometimes are the worst issues that we've got. It's not the bullets and the bombs, it's the people to our left and our right. Okay. The politics and the BS that comes in from all that. but the structure is still there, right? Still got to be there in the morning, 6:30 formation for PT. We still go through Reveille. We still go through all the things, right? And there's still a very regimented existence. Okay. When we go home at the end of the day, we don't have that anymore. We're now the head of the snake, if you will, right? But then we've got to balance and share that responsibility with our spouse. And then there's kids, and there's all this other stuff that comes into play. And we don't have a system to organize that. We've got field manuals and training manuals and doctrines and all this kind of stuff in the Army or in all the branches, but we don't have that at home. And so I've seen a lot of veterans that will try and take what we've got in the military, or a lot of service members take what we've got in the military and then go home and try and apply that to our family, but they didn't sign up on the dotted line. They don't understand it the way that we do, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't work. And a lot of people really struggle with that and falter because of that. And then they become distant. I see a lot of husbands that, we'd be out in the field and they just want to be out in the field. They just want to be in the Army. They just want to be at work all day long. Some people didn't have that. I didn't have that issue. I wanted to go home and be with my family. But other people were like, a couple hours with my family's enough. Let's just stay at work until, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And so it creates this real issue, right? But if you have a system that you can use to translate what that structure from the military into a system that works in your civilian life, you can alleviate a lot of those problems. And that's what I do with Lifebook for veterans. So I liken it, if Lifebook is like writing a business plan for your life, then for a veteran, it's like writing an operations order for your life. Right. So in the Army, for those of you that don't know, in all branches, we use a 5-paragraph operations order to organize our missions. It starts out with the situation that dictates the need for a mission, and then the mission itself, how we're going to execute it, how we're going to serve and support it, supply lines and those type of things, and then how we're going to command and control it, or command and signal. So how we're going to communicate and who's going to give the orders and all that type of stuff. And that order organizes the force and all the different jobs that we have in the branches. It organizes the force into harmony, operating for a common objective. And so that's what Lifebook does for your life. It takes all the different categories and all the different components and puts them into a harmonious plan, or for us veterans, a harmonious operations order to help us operate with effective efficiency.
I think that makes so much sense, especially the part of, or I guess I can relate to the part of, let me stay at work and not go home, or limit my time at home. Because for me, it's like, I'm great at business. Like when I'm in this office, when I'm in my business, like I am the highest of caliber and quality, right? And what I do works. But when I go home, it's not the same story. I'm a 7-figure business owner. I'm not a 7-figure father yet. I'm not a 7-figure husband yet. I'm working on it, right? But there is a clear difference in the adequacy, right, and the quality of those titles, right? And so when I go home, those inadequacies are highlighted, right?
Yeah.
And I've also realized that the systems and the strategies and the approach that I take to business, I can't take that at home.
No.
I'm married to Enneagram 2, who is like the most emotional Enneagram possible.
Yeah.
Right. And that just business strategies and running and gunning and high energy and just like getting straight to the point, though I'm a well-balanced, business owner and CEO, and I know how to balance the feminine and the masculine, but by trade, I'm a very masculine man, and so when I go home, that just doesn't work like it does in the office. And so I've had my own, life coach that I work with, who's helping me create a plan for those other titles, right? Husband, father, friend, son, everything else outside of this office. Very good in this office. I leave this office, I'm like a veteran who, doesn't have anybody telling him what to do anymore. I'm just like, how am I doing, And so me staying at work is just me avoiding those inadequacies a lot of times, right? And you don't have to do that. You can have a quality plan, right, that make you just as successful in the civilian life as you are in your military life. And so
absolutely. And you do that by figuring out who you are in each of those categories, what you want, what you believe, where those beliefs came from. You have to go in and do the work. You've got to, there's a quote that those who don't go within go without.
Yeah.
You have to go in and figure out who you are in those moments. Because, like you said, you know who you are as a seven-figure business CEO. You got that all day long,
Yeah.
right? But who are you as a dad? Well, you've only got a couple of months
Mhm.
that you've been a dad, right? So it's like you haven't defined that identity yet. So you got to go in and do the work to define it. And same thing as a husband. Even if you've been a husband for 20 years, people have been a husband for 20 years and have never gone in and defined what that means, you know?
Yeah.
So it's that's really what all of this is about. It's like just take these categories in life, even if you don't go through a program or you don't have a big, life coach, just take the categories of life and ask yourself those questions. Who am I in this category? What do I believe? What do I want? Why do I want it?
Yeah.
And what am I going to do to get it? Right? And you'd be amazed at how much difference that makes in your life to just sit down and do just that work right there.
The work that is needed. It's the work that is worth doing. And it's gonna be tough, right? Like there's no beating around it, but we just choose our hard in life, right? Like either the hard to sit down and have these conversations or the hard just to continue with the life that you feel lost in, right? You feel lack of fulfillment in. And so I love the quote that your life will expand into direct proportion to the hard conversations you're willing to have with yourself, other people, and God. And
Yep.
Lifebook asks you those questions to have those hard conversations to get to the other side of them and start seeing the results that you want to see in all 12 areas of your life.
Yeah.
And so I highly recommend anybody jumping into Lifebook. If you feel like you're spinning your wheels, if you feel like, you don't know what to do in many important areas of your life, Lifebook is definitely a great next step, very accessible and very effective. And so for anyone leaning in and just like, I need Lifebook ASAP after hearing this, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people thinking that, what would be your suggested next steps?
So, okay, so I am trying to, at this point, build, because the reason that I niched Lifebook into the veteran space, John Butcher, the founder of Lifebook, created the Leaders Program so that Lifebook users could get certified by Lifebook to facilitate other people going through Lifebook. And his vision for that was that we would all come in and then, choose our niches and be able to niche down because Lifebook is a global product right now. It's got 60,000 users worldwide, but more than that. But it makes it more difficult to market, right? When you market to 8 billion people, you know what I mean? Like that's how do you make it so that it's as palatable to as many as possible, right? And so we were tasked with niching down so that we could speak to our audiences individually, and then we could better communicate the power and the efficacy of the program. So I'm focusing on the veteran community because that's where I'm from, right? Um, but for anybody that's a veteran that wants to hear more about it, I got my landing page link. I think that I don't know how you put that out on
I'll
your
put it in the show notes. Yeah, they'll be able to look in the show notes and
I would
find
say
it.
the landing page if you're a vet, because I want to make sure that before anybody talks to me, that they've done a little bit of due diligence, that they've done a little research and made sure that this is something they're actually interested in. Because I got to be upfront and honest about it. It requires work. And if you're not willing to put the work in, don't spend your money on this program. That's the bottom line. There's um, far better ways to spend your money than wasting it on something that you're not going to do. One of my favorite quotes is the best plan in the world is the plan you're actually going to do. So it doesn't matter how good Lifebook is. If you don't do it, it's not going to be effective for you at all. It's going to be useless to you. So make sure you do a little due diligence before you do that. But if you go to the landing page, it will give you ways to get in contact with me if it's something that you really want to look into and investigate. If you're not a veteran, my program is only for veterans because I'm trying to keep our community solid in that way. But I do still have the ability to sell Lifebook licenses to people to give them access to the actual Lifebook program as it stands right now, not the Lifebook military program, which the main difference is really just me and my creating a military community around it. So you still get all the same benefits. You just won't get the Lifebook military community and then my personal assistance. But if you want to do a little research and you're not a veteran, you can look up Lifebook by Mindvalley and you can do a little research on Lifebook there. But I would say don't purchase it through Mindvalley. I'd say still come and purchase it through me. And so I have I would say you can you can put my email out for that purpose if people really want to find out from me about Lifebook. And then we'll kind of go from there if they're civilians, because I can actually get you a little bit more support just coming through me, even though you're not in my veteran community, than you would get from Mind Valley in general.
I love that. Two quick questions. So for non-military, right, them coming through you, the reason they would want to do that is because they actually have a personal contact to ask questions about. You're not going to give them further support after the purchase, but like actually talking to a human being compared to just buying off of a landing page on Mind Valley would be the reason
Yeah.
they want to come to you, right?
Yeah, and also there are other leaders who are working in their own programs as well, their own niched out versions. So somebody comes to me, I may be able to hook them up with somebody that they would hire personally for support, that is in their niche or in their arena. So you're going to get a little bit more support coming through me, and it would be enough that it would make, I think, a significant difference. It's not going to cost you any more or less coming through me than going through Mind Valley. So it's just about the support. If you're looking for a little bit more support, come through me. If that doesn't matter to you, go through Mind Valley. It's fine.
Love the idea too, as well. If you're just like, hey, I know somebody that's niche down like me. I know you're not, military, but this person is X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and they could probably help you with further support as well. So I love that. And then for your particular ideal client, if you will, like they're veterans and active military, right? Not
Yes.
just veterans.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
and for the active military, the reason that I want to do those as well is, like you said, it's not just, they're still in a space where they got to do what they're told, right? So they're not free roaming on their decisions exactly the same as we are in the veteran community, but they still need to know who they are, right? And that was a big thing for me being in the Army. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was about. And so I had all these issues when I worked for people that were not good people, or when I had issues with people in that regard. Like I had a lot of trouble. I'd be upfront. I had a lot of trouble with my leadership. But I had no trouble with my soldiers because I knew how to take care of them. And I worked for a lot of leaders in my time that did not take care of the people under them. And the problem is that because I didn't know who I was, I didn't know how to deal with that properly. So I dealt with it improperly, and it caused me a lot of issues. So it's really important that knowing yourself, knowing what you're about, knowing how you want to operate helps you to be more stable in the rapids and currents that we all go through as veterans and in life in general. So I think it's an incredibly important tool for active duty military as well.
Awesome. I appreciate the clarity there.
Yeah.
And just a very valuable opportunity, very low barrier to entry, but it does require the work. And that's how it should be. That's how it should be, especially these types of drastic results that you will get. So, James, before we end here, where can people find you and connect outside of your landing page and email? Or if that's just it, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I've got the social media channels out there. I've got Facebook, I've got Instagram, I've got YouTube, and I have to admit though, I'm still getting those kind of into the efficacy space. So I'm not the social media guy. I'm kind of old school that way, but I'm dragging my I'm getting dragged into it because that's the world we're living in. But I am there. You can find me on those platforms as well.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, anybody listening to this, if this stood out to you in the slightest bit, reach out to James. I highly vouch for him. He is a good friend of mine, but he's also a client of mine. And I guess the highest tier client that you can become of mine, which is a private mentorship client. So him and I have been working one-on-one with each other for a while. Like before this episode started, we were joking. We were like, this should be easy because we talk to each other a ton every single day. So like there should be no awkwardness here. If anything, this should be the best flowing podcast I've ever had. And so the point of saying that is I'm in very close proximity to James. I've seen him in tough times. I've seen him in great times, and his character remains true and stable and rooted in God. And there's not many people I could vouch for more, especially when it comes to the services that he'll be able to provide you. Like James's services are one of those things where you're going to cost you and your family so much more by not having it than you would by having it. And I'm not even just talking about money. I'm talking about stress, anxiety, missed opportunities, and problems you don't need to go through. Right? We choose our heart in life. And so what you're going through right now may be very hard. And so will the work that you put in with James, but at least pick the one option that has a strong return on investment.
Yeah.
Right. And so For anybody listening to this, if this landed for you, reach out to James, or if you know anybody, particularly, active or post-military, please send them this episode, right? Please send them this information, right? And worst case scenario, they just at least know what their options and possibilities are, even if they're not ready for it quite yet. And so, James, I really appreciate you coming to the show, dude. Thank you
Yeah,
for being
brother.
here.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, man. I want to say a little bit about you before we cut out here because you're a pretty good dude, man. I hunt for quality people in my life. That's been kind of a theme of mine for a while now because I truly believe we are the sum total of the people that we surround ourselves with. And so if we want to get higher, we've got to get to people that are higher than us so they can pull us up. And then if we get above them, we pull them back up and we pull other people up and that's how it should work. And I got to say, man, you are one of the highest people that I've ever worked with, and it's just been my honor to do so. To be part of your community, to be able to provide value to your audience and your podcast, and just be able to do any of that has just been phenomenal. And I want to say one other thing too. You'd mentioned about God, and I know maybe not everybody listening is a Christian. That's okay. I'm not trying to beat anybody with my Bible or anything. But I got to say that one thing that really changed my life was understanding the difference between being a, quote unquote, good man and being a godly man. And having that system, God's system, to be put into a system like the one I'm using here, everything gets supercharged when you organize and you structure your life through systems that are built by much more effective, much more intelligent entities, beings, people, whatever the case is. Like the work that we're talking about doing becomes not just easier, it becomes more purposeful, and then it becomes fun, and then it becomes just everything. Your work that you're putting in just becomes everything. So I hope everybody can take some value out of this and make the connections they need to make, and let's make this world a place we want to live in.
Absolutely love that, dude. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the sentiment in God. Like when we have our foundations in Him, everything else that we have our hands in or desires on, seem to get supercharged, as you mentioned. And so having people in your corner, right, that believe in stuff like that, not stuff like that, believe in God and believe in having Him in the things that you do will massively supercharge the results that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And so James is that guide for you. And again, thank you for being here, bro. And thank you for everybody that listened to this episode. I hope it provided value for you. And like I always say, I know I end the episode saying this all the time, I'm trying to create content that changes this world, right? And having guests on like James Beck really does help, especially with the things that he's focusing on and providing. But a big part of creating content that's going to change this world is as many people as possible hearing it. So if you know somebody that would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Download, subscribe, and keep coming back for more episodes, because I promise you the content's going to keep getting better and better and better. And make sure that you also revisit episodes. That's one thing I'm famous for. There's probably some podcast episodes out there that I've listened to at least 10 times, right? And revisiting them in different seasons. And I have a feeling that this episode is going to be one of those. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast.
All right. Thank you.